discuss everything from the Six Nations as we build up for the France game is two of our esteemed writers. I've got the incredible Matt Southcombe and the astounding Andy Howells.
Bit over the top there. I've never heard that said before.
That was an introduction. John Dull, take notes.
Right, well, we've got plenty to talk about. The Wales camp, they gave us something to discuss today. That's scrummaging. Some interesting quotes that came out from Jonathan Humphreys yesterday. Before we discuss that, why don't we have a listen to exactly what he had to say?
I think it's inconsistent for me. The laws are clear. They're very clear that you must push straight. That's what it says. And yet there are still rewards out for tight heads who angle across the scrum. And people talk about instability and resets. Well, the majority of that comes from that. If people were forced to push straight and push square, you'd have a pushing contest, which everybody wants. And hopefully the referees will become harder and harder and harder on this. And I reckon with that you get more and more stability and more of a contest.
And what was your view of that Dylan Lewis scrum?
Look, there comes that inconsistency for us. It's clearly obvious that Tad Furlong has hammered right across the scrum. It created instability left to right, but we got to deal with that. We dealt with it for most of the game. The one scrum that we had to do that, we didn't. So that's our fault.
Sharp learning curve.
Massive learning curve. But look, there's I believe potentially these young tight heads especially, they could go on and be phenomenal for us. So it's my experience with dealing with a lot of tight heads over the years. You got to deal with that, but there's no excuse for us.
So there you go. Tadhg Furlong, scrummaging illegally, France cheating. Andy, what do you make of it?
Well, I think Wales again they're a bit naive. They're saying this. It's all about bending the rules. Every team does it. Every team cheats. If you look at any scrum that takes place on a rugby pitch, cheating starts with the scrum half who feeds the ball into the second rows. So if I were Wales, I would concentrate on their own scrummaging issues, which they had in Ireland, not on Furlong's side of the scrum, but on Dylan Lewis's side when Dylan got tired and twice collapsed scrums. The second time with he was in a key attacking position for Wales, where it was a great opportunity to score a try. Ireland celebrated as though they'd won a World Cup. That was a turning point in the match. They went down the other end and saw Wales off. So there's ways to counter alleged cheating. Wales were complaining about Furlong scrummaging, turning inwards and twisting. Well, it's up to the loose head prop, Wyn Jones, who yesterday also spoke to the press. He used the word cheats about the French actually, but about Furlong. But it was up to Wyn Jones to counter Tadhg Furlong by scrummaging and make him scrummage honestly and square. Now you've got to sort these problems out on a pitch yourself. It's no good just bleating about the scrums, accusing the opposition of cheating, whatever. You've got to work out ways to counter it, and you've got to cheat yourself. That's the bottom line.
Well, if you look at it was quite a lively press conference up at the Vale yesterday. They clearly had something to get off their chest. They wanted to set the narrative for this week, I think. And I think they achieved that because we're sat here talking about scrums, and so's everybody else. Jonathan Humphreys was asked the question. First question yesterday was about Hallam Amos's call up, and he gave a very short response and finished by saying, "But I'm not here to talk about the backs. I want to talk about the forwards." So it was very clear that they wanted to get this off their chest. Same goes for Wyn Jones, but let's cut to the chase. Wales are not the first people to accuse Tadhg Furlong of scrummaging illegally. His angle comes up a lot. Dan Cole, same with him, with England. And like Andy said, you really get a perfect scrum where everybody's willing to scrummage within the laws. It tends not to happen, unfortunately. Jonathan Humphreys was after a scrum where everybody pushes square, and then you get a pushing contest, as he called it. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that these days because everyone's trying to get an upper hand one way or another. So they've come in, they've set the narrative and set the agenda for the week. They're perhaps trying to get into the referee's head. Matt Carley, I believe it's only his second Six Nations game. The Principality Stadium, full house, is going to be tough for him. Perhaps they want to get into him that it's not going to be us. We want to paint the perfect pictures, as they said. Is
it psychological as well? I mean, talking about setting the narrative. Obviously, before the Ireland game, there was a lot of talk about Wales' scrum being the big weakness. Maybe proved to be the case, and now they're maybe trying to deflect that, trying to change that narrative. It's not us, it's them.
Yeah, they're trying to win over the referee before the match. You know, that's what's going on here. But invariably, a referee will reward a scrum as going forward. Doesn't matter about the shapes and all of it. It's the firm's going forward. And Dylan buckled against Ireland because he was tired, couldn't take the weight, buckled inwards and went and collapsed. So that's why he was penalised. I was listening to Jonathan Humphreys. It was like a rewind to when he was Ospreys forwards coach, because his message he sent out yesterday is what he used to send out when the Ospreys had a couple of tune-ins or problems against Leicester in the Heineken Cup, and he claimed Leicester were cheating at the scrum. And this is a similar sort of message. They're trying to get out early, trying to get the referee. But they're accusing the French of being cheats. I don't know where they've got that from, because of France is a new scrum. It's work in progress. The scrum is not great, by the way, so that gives me some hope for this weekend with the Welsh scrum. Italy gave them problems at the scrum in the last match. So, I spoke to Graham Price this morning, Wales legend, record Lions prop, test appearances, and he said that the French are pretty good technically, but it's up to Wales to manipulate them and start cheating themselves, start bending the rules. That's what you've got to do.
With on the scrum that's annoyed Wales is that penalty that came in the second half against Ireland, where Andy's alluded to there, Dylan Lewis penalised for taking the scrum down. To me, I don't think there's much of a debate on that one. I think, when I watched it live and watched it back, it looks like a stonewall penalty against Wales. However, I think if you go back to the first half, in the build-up to Tadhg Furlong's try, actually, the advantage was given for Wales collapsing that scrum, and Ireland Furlong eventually scored a few phases later. I think if you watch that back, Wales can feel hard done by there, because it looked to me like Furlong took it down. But they've taken issue with the scrum in the second half, and I think they're backing up the wrong tree, really.
The second half scrum, let's just put this into perspective, but Furlong wasn't scrummaging against Dylan Lewis anyway. He was up against Wayne Jones. I think Matt is right about the first half. That should have been penalty to Wales. Graham Price went through it this morning. The second instance, the first scrum went down, so the referee reset the scrum, and it went down. Pricey said it went down because Dylan couldn't take the weight and took it down. So Pratt reset the scrum. He ran round the other side of the scrum on Lewis's side and watched it. And Pricey said exactly the same thing happened again, and he had no choice other than to penalise Wales. Now, Graham's contention is Warren Gatland was a master of substituting props at the right time in the game. When they were tired, when he'd seen some weakness or whatever, and sometimes he'd take them off after 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Remember in South Africa 2014, he took Adam Jones off before the half-hour mark. Yeah. And so this is what perhaps the new regime have got to get right. They're new to Test rugby. They've got to get right when to make those big decisions, when to substitute people.
Well, this debate's going to go on and on. We are yet to hear what the Island camp make of Wales's claims. We're yet to hear from the French camp on it. I'm sure we'll be writing some more headlines on this subject matter in the next couple of days, and you can read all that on Wales Online. Meanwhile, if you've got any questions for our two panellists, please write them on the Facebook page. We're more than happy to answer any of your questions. But should we move on to Shaun Edwards? Understandably a focal point this week. Talking about narratives, the Shaun Edwards and narrative is an absolutely obvious one. My question to you guys is it a problem that he knows these players as well as he does?
Not really, because I think any coach worth his salt that they would know exactly what the opposition are going to do, because you've got videos. So you can just analyse it to death, can't you, in any sport. So yeah, he knows what he does know about Welsh players. He'll know which ones are strong mentally, which ones are weak, which ones to go after, that sort of thing. So I don't see it as a problem that he knows the Welsh players, and maybe Wales got to be clever here and come up with something different that Edwards wouldn't expect. That's the job of the new coaches.
I slightly disagree with Andy on that. I think it is a bit of an issue. I remember watching the behind-the-scenes documentary of the Barbarians game recently, and you hear Warren Gatland talking about the Welsh players and that, and it makes you realise that they know what these Welsh players are going to do probably before they even know themselves. Especially Gatland. A lot of the Welsh, speak to any Welsh player and they will speak very highly of Shaun Edwards. There's a lot of respect there. I think it works both ways. You will know the tendencies of these players and what they, if they can fall asleep at certain moments in games, and how to exploit that, manipulate them. As Andy said, there's a lot of analysis that goes on these days, but I think it gives Edwards a little bit of an edge that, for 10, 12 years he was in the camp. He blooded a lot of this squad, or was part of that process. So that knowledge that he's got is going to probably come in quite handy. But like Andy said, it's now incumbent on Wales, and particularly Stephen Jones, attack coach, to come up with something that's going to surprise Shaun Edwards and surprise France, and hopefully, from Wales's point of view, catch them off guard.
Yeah, for example, he doesn't know anything about Nick Tompkins, so if he plays for Wales, there's a new problem for Shaun Edwards, because he doesn't know the bloke at all. So you can maybe that's a reason, perhaps an added reason to play Tompkins against France, is that the surprise factor to Shaun Edwards.
Let's flip it on his head then. How do Wales break down the Shaun Edwards defence? Will people like Alan Wynne-Jones, because they've worked with him for so long, know exactly where the chinks are?
Well, this is it. So we've just talked about Edwards knowing the Welsh players. Nobody knows Shaun Edwards' defensive systems better than these Welsh players. So whilst Edwards has got knowledge on them, they've also got knowledge on him, and can pass that knowledge on to Stephen Jones, and together they can come up with a game plan that's going to try and bypass whatever Edwards is going to bring. One of the staples of his defence has always been that high 13. It's always been line speed. They use Gareth Davies as a spot blitzer, but not everyone is capable of that. So, if they are going to bring the line speed we expect, we've seen Wales come unstuck in the past with little chips over the top. It's the best way to beat line speed. Also got to win the battles in the tight as well before you can go wide, because you've got to suck those defenders in, so they can't bring that line speed and that high 13. So there are little things they can do, and like I said, it works both ways. They know each other equally well.
Yeah, there was chinks in the Welsh defence, most recently under Edwards anyway. During the World Cup and before the World Cup, England exposed it by bringing runners back on the decoy, bringing runners back on the angle, and loads of decoy runners. Ben James, our colleague, he's done an excellent piece, analysis of the Edwards defence online as well with Reed, and he sets it out there. And Italy used those same tactics against France 2 weeks ago, and they had quite a bit of joy as well in the second half by using loads of decoy runners outside half, taking a ball flat and bringing runners on the ball in gaps. And Shaun Edwards, brilliant defence coach, but of course Wales haven't done fantastically against the Southern Hemisphere during the reign of Gatland either. So it can be exposed with the right tactics and the right players hitting angles. And Adley Parks, he hit some great angles against Ireland. If he can do that against France, there's no reason why Wales can't punish him.
It's going to be a fascinating part of the game, there's no doubt about that. Let's move on to selection. In fact, we've had a couple of questions in, specifically on selection. So why don't we go to Nathan Long, who asks, or says, the back row wasn't physical enough against Ireland. Would you start Moriarty over Wainwright against France?
Yeah, I definitely start him. Yeah, I think I would probably start him at 6 as well, and I think I would now keep Faletau in the side of number 8. Wouldn't have started with Faletau at the beginning of the championship, because I didn't think he was match fitting enough. Now he's had a couple more games under his belt, and I think Wales are going to need some extra experience as well against the French, who've got a big and good back row themselves. So I would play Faletau at 8, and I would have the extra physicality of Moriarty at 6. And he's going to be revved up like anything for this game if he gets picked. He's that sort of animal, big game player, and he will certainly want to prove a point with the coach Wayne Pivac if he selects him.
Yeah, I think just touching on what Andy said, we're blessed in the back row. It's a good headache to have. But Moriarty, you've seen in his performances when he's come off the bench recently, this isn't going to sit well with him the way things have panned out, not just in the Six Nations but also at the World Cup as well. Don't forget, he was coming off the bench a lot out in Japan, and we know that doesn't sit well with him. So I think I've been impressed with his cameos off the bench in this championship. I think he's brought that physicality, as our viewers mentioned there, that's been lacking a little bit. He's carried well, defends well, and with Moriarty, he's going to run into brick walls all day for you, and you need those kind of players in your side. And if he does get a chance to start, and as Andy said, he's going to be fired up. He's going to want to make a point to the new regime that he doesn't want to be sitting on the bench. He wants that starting jersey. It'd be harsh, a little harsh, I think, on Wainwright, because I don't think he's done a whole lot wrong. But when you're as blessed as Wales are in the back row, sometimes a bit of rotation doesn't hurt.
Yeah, Wales need carriers as well, ball carriers. If you look at the stats from the Ireland game, the forwards didn't make many metres with the ball. So Moriarty is a big, bruising ball carrier if you can get him on the ball.
Is there any other areas you change up? Also, Dan Bigger, we think he's fit. It looks that way at the minute. Signs are good. Mark Johnson asking on Facebook, is it a risk to even play him to suffer his third concussion in 5 months?
Yeah. I mean, there's been I've seen a few things knocking around along this theme, So we know Dan suffered 2 heavy concussions during the World Cup. One against Australia, one against Fiji. He was clear to play in the quarter-final against France and continued to play throughout the championship until obviously the third place game. It's very difficult to comment on this sort of thing because we don't know. I haven't spoken to Dan Bigger since his concussion. I haven't spoken to any of the medics about Dan Bigger since his concussion. They are saying to us that he's passing all the tests. Neil Jenkins suggested that this concussion wasn't as bad as the ones he suffered in the World Cup, which he admitted were a concern. Anybody who saw those concussions will have felt the same way. Wales are telling us he's passing all his tests. He's progressing through his graduated return to play protocols. Obviously now, come Saturday, it will have been 2 weeks since the Ireland game. I think you've got to take the Welsh medical staff at their word on this. I don't think they're the kind of medical team to play around with a player's safety. And I think if he continues passing all the tests that are in place at the moment, then there's no reason not to play him.
Okay, let's assume he's in. Moriarty starts in our team. Are you making any other changes?
I think probably the other biggest headache is at centre. You got Nick Tompkins, who had a rough day at the office in Dublin. I think everybody saw that. Obviously had a massive debut against Italy the week before, coming off the bench. I think that game out in Dublin, he sort of grew into it a little bit more. I was kind of the opinion that that 13 channel was a big issue in terms of the defensive woes that were suffered out in the Aviva Stadium. I think Ireland had a lot of joy there, particularly Robbie Henshaw before he went off was outstanding. I think it's dangerous to drop him straight away though. I think it probably sets a dangerous precedent. I know Owen Watkin played well for the Ospreys on the weekend and is back in the frame now after having a knee injury. But I think I'd probably just stick with Tompkins for now because I think he did well enough against Italy. He would have learned a lot out in Dublin. I think he got better as that game went on as well. Put in a big hit on Lama, try-saver in the second half. Started to get to grips with it a bit more. So I'd probably be inclined to stick with him, but it's a big call.
Yeah, Watkin did well at the weekend for the Ospreys, man. It was a really impressive comeback after cartilage
that was one of,
surgery.
One of my next questions really was, did anybody else put their hands up on the weekend, or did anybody else fail to take their chance?
But I also as well looked at back row Aaron Shingler for the Scarlets, because before the weekend I had him in contention to play at blindside flank against France, but he didn't grab that game by the scruff of his neck. In my estimation, he didn't help his cause. Watkins certainly did, though he did look as though when he was turning to the right a bit, that he didn't look entirely comfortable. I agree with Matt, you've got to go with Nick Tompkins on this match. You can't just play the guy for one game and then drop him. The damage that could do. I think I'd probably have Watkin on the bench though for this game.
Great. Well, I think we've got time for one or two more questions, so let's see what's coming in. Luke Williams asks, is this just another false dawn for French rugby, or are they the real deal this time? That age-old question. Yeah,
it's early days for them because they are building for the next World Cup, which they host in, and they've won the last two under-20 world titles, and some of those guys are already playing for this in this match. We've had the outside half debate if Bigger's not fit, and there's been people who said, the outside halves are not experienced enough. Well, look at the French outside half, he's only 20. Roman Antamac, they've just thrown him in, and he's done well most of the time. So France are definitely building for the future. This is it's a pivotal game for Wales in particular. They lose this match, they're out of the championship. For France, if they win this game, it really gives them momentum to go on and win the title. I've not been entirely convinced by them. They don't look as fit as some other countries, and I think Wales hopefully can score on that in the final quarter of the match, and they could be a bit vulnerable if Wales can get on top of them a bit. Principality Stadium, magnificent crowd and all in their faces, making a lot of noise. You wonder if some of those young French players maybe they could have a bit of an off day or freeze a bit, with all that's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, they blew England away, didn't they, in the first game? That was impressive, but as Andy touched on, Italy got some joy against them, albeit in defeat, but they weren't wholly convincing in that game. I think this is a really good yardstick for them on Saturday. If they come to Cardiff and can turn over Wales here, that would be a big statement for them, given where they are at the moment. Whether they're capable of it remains to be seen.
Okay, we've got maybe time for one more question, and this seems a pertinent one, given the floods that, of course, decimated parts of South Wales this week. In fact, it affected many rugby clubs in the valleys and beyond. We heard yesterday, I think, that the WRU were meeting to discuss if they could help at all. Rob Bradshaw, great idea. Should the WRU give a percentage of ticket income to clubs who are currently underwater?
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Why not? I'm surprised the WRU didn't call an emergency meeting yesterday to discuss the issue, because it's a real issue with the clubs. You feel not just you feel sorry for the those rugby clubs and everything, and some of them are Bedwas, for example. They're fighting for survival because of this, and WRU, I think they got to look after their clubs, and surely they should. Why not make a small donation from ticket sales, because we're an international rugby match. How much does it generate? 6 figures.
Yeah, we're trying to get to the WRU to find out what they're planning on doing on this. I've tried to get hold of them this morning. First of all, I spoke to the chairman at Rumley RFC in East Cardiff earlier in the week, and you just hear the stories. I'm sure it's a similar story in a lot of clubs, as you touched on as well. See Cross Keys as well, Bedwas struggling. It's really difficult to see clubs. We all love rugby. We all started out going to these local rugby clubs, and we still do. A lot of us have got connections with the local game, and it's tough to see clubs going through this. So any help that can be provided by the Welsh Rugby Union would be welcomed. It's great to see the Dragons sending their staff up to Cross Keys. I believe Dean Ryan was up there. They've opened their gates to their training ground to mini and junior sections to have their games. I think Bedwas are actually playing at Leicester.
They are this week. Yeah.
This week,
against Meath.
Which is great. And the Cardiff Blues as well, sending out a message asking people to contact them if they need help. So it is great to see the professional sides offering a hand to the local teams.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the Welsh Rugby Union is a union of clubs. It's actually owned by the clubs, and it's the responsibility of the board of the WRU to give a bit in return, and look after those clubs who've hit hard times by a natural disaster.
Yeah.
It's not because this clubs have been foolhardy in their spending or whatever. This is because of a natural disaster.
And of course, we're expecting more rain in the next couple of days, which is the last thing anybody wants, to be frank. Well, we'll leave it there for today, but follow us on Wales Online for all the breaking news, including that WRU response to the flooding in South Wales. Join us again, same time tomorrow. Thank you very much.